I think we live in a culture where relationships are transforming. The way traditional relationships used to be, it was very much about function. Man is the provider, the woman is taking care of the family or home. So it was very much about functions. In today's world, that is not the case, right? We're both, everyone is working, everyone is pursuing career. It's more about love, it's more about something different. So the way we pursue, the way we look at relationship is transforming. However, I think the way we think about relationship hasn't changed much. We still have this idea of that comes from Disney movies, that a Prince Charming will come along for the princess, they will fall in love, they will get married, and they'll walk into the sunset happily ever after. This is what we've been told, this is what we've been sold, and that is where I think there's a lot of confusion about relationships, that we are looking to acquire relationship as opposed to what is needed in this day and age is to actually get into relationship with relationship, as in relationship itself is work and practice. So what I have learned about relationships is that instead of looking at relationship as something to acquire, something to control, it is about, we say there's the saying that the rules of production that we use in our day-to-day life at work, when we are out and about in the world, are 180 degrees different from the rules of connection. So what is needed in relating with a human being and connection is completely opposite to what we apply at work. But the biggest issue we have is that we bring the rules of production into our relationships, right? And that is why there's been so much of an issue. So what I look at is there's 5 principles in creating deeper connections. And those 5 things, just to give you a high-level perspective, one is our relationship with desire, like what we want from life. Quite often when we look at what we want, we look at it as a transaction. As in, I'll do something for you, and in result, at some point, I want something back from you. So it's a transaction. While when we look at it from a connection perspective, desire is about me, what I want, as opposed to expecting something back from somebody. So when I'm in that place, how I relate is completely different. That's one thing. Similarly, how we look at attention, how we look at connection, how we look at getting variety. So for example, with variety, we say variety is spice of life, right? But what happens is that in today's world, we are running after one thing after the other, especially with dating apps, with so much choices. We're continuously going from one thing to the other, looking for more and more variety. But the way it works in connection is that we increase our attention. Like there's an example when you look at a flower, right? And you look at it, and the more you look at it, the more nuances you get to see about it. So when you increase attention, you get limitless variety in that, as opposed to going from one thing to the other, because we're not actually getting depth of connection through variety that way. So we need to find variety inside through increasing attention. And then the 5th one is mastery. So when we look at the production side of the world, mastery is about comparison. Like I'm competing with someone, and that's how I grow. Like I am better than and you are less than, or I am less than and you are better than. But when we go into the connection side of the equation, mastery is about how can I be better than myself. It's a collaborative approach, but mastery is about me and my past version, and how do I get to be a better human being, as opposed to continuously comparing myself with other people. So that's that. Then one of the big areas that we work on in relationship is our relationship with truth. What is truth? Quite often we say that relationships are about compromise. But what happens when we compromise is that we are hiding something from somebody. And over a period of time, when we do that, we start to build these layers of disconnection. And in a few years' time, what happens is that we can't relate to the other person because there's so many things that we've put in between connection, just thinking that, oh, if I say this or if I do something, it'll cause hurt. But ultimately, what happens is because we are hiding so much truth, it ends up causing harm. So truth and being able to connect from this place that you're able to tell the kind of truth to your partner that has the potential to break your relationship. If you're not doing that, we say that you're actually moving towards a breakup. So truth is one of the big things. And then there's this idea of communication and emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is very much about connecting with our bodies, connecting with becoming self-aware, understanding who we are and how we got to the place where we got to in our life. What are our self-beliefs? What is our cultural conditioning? What are our triggers? So understanding all of that is about self-awareness. So when you become more self-aware, you are more embodied, you learn about how to regulate your emotions. And when you are able to do that, there's a different kind of relationship that we can start to build with other people that has empathy inbuilt in it. Because empathy is about being able to feel into the feeling states of other human beings, i.e., if I am talking to you and you're angry or you're upset or you're sad or you're happy, I can feel that in my body because I am an open-hearted human being and I can empathize with it. So that is what empathy is. And when together with that, when I have emotional regulation, when I can tell what is my emotion and what am I feeling from another person, right? Then I can channel it better. I can be more socially aware. I can relate with somebody better. So emotional intelligence is a big part in understanding ourselves and then also learning how to relate. And when we are learning how to relate, a big thing that people run away from is conflict, right? A lot of the times I see, I was one of them. I used to avoid conflict. But part of emotional intelligence is to learn how to have good conflict in life. How can you, when the energy rises and something needs to be sorted out between two people, a good fight is amazing. So learning to fight well is a big part of what we call this transition from a traditional relationship to this new form, what I like to call conscious relating. And then I would say there's this concept of creating a third. A lot of the time, traditional relationships were about managing a family or taking care of the family, for example. In today's world, when we are all aligned to our purposes, we are doing something, we're making money, we're making things happen, how do you create a great relationship inside of that? And the idea there is that instead of when two people come together and they are both becoming the best version of themselves, how do they support each other? How do they become friends of each other in making sure that each person becomes the best version of themselves? They get to be the best of their potential. And in that, what happens is that instead of focusing light inwards, you learn to focus it outwards in the culture, in society, in the world outside, making changes. And with that, there's this idea that happens is that you create a third within the relationship. There's two people, but the relationship itself has its own entity. So creating the third. And then there are things like what kind of assumed agreements we have. In relationship, a lot of the time what happens is that I come from a particular background and I have ideas that, in relationship, you can't look at somebody else, for example. Now I assume that. And if you look at somebody else, then you're cheating, for example, right? So what I'm saying is I have, because of my background, because of my culture, because of how I grew up, if someone does this, then it is a wrong thing. It's a right or wrong, good or bad. Similarly, my partner has other things that she assumes or they assume about me. Now, we never talk about those things. We just assume that that's the case. So a big part of creating relationships in this new world is how do you bring these kind of things that are hidden, that are assumed, into more of a overt agreement. So relationship itself is an agreement. Like two people or two or more people come together and want to live a life in a certain way. Then how do you create a relationship agreement where I come and say, oh, this is what I want. You come and say, this is what I want. And then we actually come together and see how we can make it happen. And how are we going to communicate inside of that? How are we going to relate inside of that? How are we going to fight inside of that? How are we going to take care of each other inside of that? Now, that is how a relationship gets created. So instead of assuming that once you get into a relationship, that is just going to work out and, we'll just live happily ever after. My experience with relationship is that you have to work on it. You have to continuously work on it. And you have to bring levity, you have to bring play inside of it. I went through a divorce myself 10 years ago, and now I'm married again. And our relationship is very much about consciousness. We talk about everything. We fight a lot. But there's a way that we know connection is more important than being right. We say, do you want to be right or do you want to be connected? So that is one of the big principles that we follow in our relationship. And through that work, through practice, you can create a very successful, what I call a conscious relating, where you're continuously working at it and you're having fun, you're enjoying it. Sometimes you suffer. Sometimes it's hard, but that's part of it. You don't just say, oh, it's hard, so I'm going to disconnect, but you learn from it and you keep going. In that way, relationship becomes a really good spiritual practice in a way, because when we are closely related to someone, that person is a mirror. Like that they're continuously showing us a mirror about us. So in that way, it is a great tool for personal development and self-growth as well.